I'm Mike Dowdy, and this is the School Leadership Show. In this episode, I interview the host of one of my favorite podcasts, The Productivityist, by Mike Vardy. Mike was an amazing person to interview. He's a writer, a speaker, and a productivity strategist. He's also great to talk to. He and I have a lively discussion about all things productivity. What's cool is that we start out kind of with the big picture, task-centric versus time-centric thinking, mode-based theming for your days and weeks, and Mike's own Now Year method. And Mike actually provided a link to listeners of this show to get free access to his basic workflow for the Now Year method. That's at productivityist.com/Dowdy. So you can learn more about Mike and his work at productivityist.com or at mikevardy.com. And I know you're going to enjoy this interview, and Mike did promise a part two, so I think we're going to hold him to it. Enjoy this interview with Mike Vardy. I'm here with Mike Vardy today of The Productivityist. Mike, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Mike.
I tell you, I told you this when we were talking before we started recording that I was going to go all fanboy. So I am. You're one of my go-to podcasts. I never miss an episode of The Productivityist. So I am so thrilled to have you on.
Well, thanks for having me. I really appreciate that.
So, this podcast is for aspiring and practicing school leaders. And maybe you want to share a little bit about your background and kind of what you've been working on recently, particularly related to executive functioning, because that's some pretty fascinating stuff.
Yeah, so I mean, my origins kind of date back to when I was working for Costco, and that's kind of when I really got into productivity, especially when I was trying to balance that along with my creative career that I was developing at the time and family. I'm a father of two. At the time, my daughter was, young. She was going on 2 years old, and so I started to really study productivity. And over the years, I became, I went from being an enthusiast to a specialist, and now to a strategist. And that was over 10 years ago when I finally left Costco. And now I've been working on my own, running my own company for a while. But the executive functioning stuff's really come to the forefront as my kids have gotten older. And, I've got a 5-year-old son who'll be 6 in July. My daughter's 11. And one of the things that I find in schools is that, the idea of time management and task management, there's some odd things that happen. And I don't think it's a fault of any kind of the teachers or anything. My mother-in-law is a teacher. I've gone and taught workshops, and I know that when you do a 4-hour workshop, I'm done for the day. Like I don't know how teachers do it. They do it all day, and I do one 4-hour session. I'm like, okay, I'm out for the next couple days. But what I noticed is that, for example, my son, he has no understanding of time. Really, he has no real concept of it. His concept of time is measured by how long a show is. So we would say, this is 3 shows is how much shows you'll get to watch before we have to go do this. My daughter, of course, understands time now, but what's interesting is as kids are at home before they go to school, they're very task oriented. They want to do the thing that they're doing and finish that before they move on to something else. They have no real concept of time. And what happens is as we get older and as we go through schooling and then are exposed to a larger world where there's one measurement that we can all agree on, and it's time. Hence why we're recording this at a specific time of the day. Otherwise, you would be talking to yourself, as would I. We tend to I think we tend to go too far. So what happens is we go from a task centric to overly time centric, and we need to find some kind of harmony between those. And that's where I think that the idea of focusing on some executive functioning skills in the middle school area, as well as once you get to high school, college, where their brains are a little bit more mature. The brains of students are a bit more mature, and they have an understanding of things a little bit greater. But at the age that my daughter is at, that's where there's still a lot of plasticity. That the whole idea of the brain being very plastic still. So one of the things I want to do with the methodology I teach, which is called the Now Year method, is I want to go into schools, and we're already starting this initiative up here where I live. in Victoria, BC, where I go into schools and I just do talks. I go into the schools and I do talks with and introduce this methodology of working by mode, like mode based work and theming your days and things like that, which are frankly those are in schools already. It's, I mean, I remember going to school and I see it now where certain subjects you were in class at a certain time and certain classes you take on certain days as go through the school system. That's something that I really want to spend time on because what freaks me out a bit is that when everyone comes out of school, there's two areas that they don't get a lot of focus time with, and that's money management and time management. One of those you can earn, the other you cannot. I want to focus on the one that you cannot. You have to invest wisely as you have it, and that's time.
So I'm going to push on you a little bit there. So
Sure.
this idea of mode-based work and theming your day and stuff like that. So a lot of the folks that I work with, school administrators, they don't have a ton of control over what
Hmm.
happens during their day. They might be interrupted. There's kind of a lot coming at them all at once. How do you coach people to work that theming in with the understanding that you might be pulled away?
Well, I think the term that I prefer to use is train rather than coach. Coaching is getting a bit of a bad rap these days. People are throwing the word coach around, and some of them. I prefer to use training because it just shows that I've done it first, and here's how you can do it. And I've seen with all of my coaching clients. Believe me, this is not a new question that you push back with me on. But what I say to people in these situations is, okay, I understand that you're going to have disruptions and distractions throughout your day. But what your brain really does need is an anchor every single day. It needs anchors because that's what it can look towards. What happens if you get interrupted is normally people jump back into email when they've been interrupted, or they look at their to-do list, which is fairly lengthy and maybe not segmented all that well. What theming does and what mode-based work does is it connects you back to the human component of yourself. So either the brain or whatever your emotional state is, you can actually tap into that. More often the brain is what you're going to be looking at. So for example, today is Monday as we're recording this. It's my writing day. I'm not writing right now. You and I are talking. When we are done, I will not look at my to-do list. I will say, what day is it? Oh, it's Monday. Monday is writing day. Now let me look at all the tasks that are associated with writing. The same thing can happen with people who have 9 to 5 jobs or jobs that are largely out of their control. When they have a moment of respite or a break or clarity, instead of going, what's next on my list? How do I check email? What do I do? It's, what day is it? It's Monday. Monday is administrative day. Okay, let me look at all the tasks that are administratively related.
Well, and that
That
idea of anchor tasks, that's
mhm,
not foreign to good teaching and learning.
no.
That's one of the strategies that we teach teachers often say, okay, if kids finish their work early, they need to have something, an anchor task or something that they go back to. So you're saying, theme your days with anchor tasks and then,
Or anchor modes. I mean, because the modes are a bit broader because people don't want to be pigeonholed into a specific task because the brain will always look, especially if it's because what some people will do is they'll get lazy and they'll pick an easy task like check email. Like I'm thinking like those anchor tasks more like anchor modes or anchor modalities, which is okay, it's communication. What communication do I need to do right now? Okay, some of that could be email, some of that could be phone calls. We tend to work by project because it's objective rather than work by mode, which is subjective. So you would never go into a grocery store, for example, and shop by your meal plan for the week because you would be shopping by Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday through Sunday, and you'd be going all over the grocery store a bunch of different times, visiting the meat department 7 times, produce 7 times. You would go to the meat department, grab everything you need for the week, and then move on to the produce department and do that. But we don't work like that very often. We work scattered. We work fragmented, which is what project work generally is. I mean, the project is the thing that kind of holds it all together. But when you work by mode, you're working in this mentality of, okay, I am now in email mode. Let me see what emails I want to deal with, those missions that I have, and let me deal with emails that have come in. I'm going to go on the phone now. Let me make all the phone calls I need to make, and therefore move maybe 3 or 4 projects forward instead of let me do everything revolving around this project and maybe make a phone call, jump into Microsoft Excel, and then go on email, and then run an errand, and so it really puts you it gives you the ability to get into the state of flow. Not just get into it, but stay in it when you start to operate a bit more thematically or with modalities in mind.
so it's like batching but by themes.
Yeah, and time becomes a secondary condition there because what we do is, and I'm not a big believer in scheduling every moment of the day either, because again, that removes that ability to have some flexibility, and also removes the durability of your system as well. Because when something interrupts you, which will happen, or an opportunity comes along, you get frazzled because that thing that you scheduled to do gets cast aside. So theming allows you to semi-schedule your day to a point because you're giving yourself permission to work on a specific mode of task or a specific area of your work. And then if you do get interrupted, instead of going, what was that thing I was working on? Or, oh no, I was supposed to work on email from 1 to 1:25. You say, okay, well, it's communication day. So what communications can I get to? I think that that's really key because if you hyper schedule your day, which is what I call it when you schedule every waking moment of the day, you don't leave room for the boy to show up. And I use that analogy from the book About a Boy. Is the protagonist in that story scheduled his day in 15-minute increments, and that worked fine until the boy showed up. And when the boy showed up, all of a sudden everything went out the window. And the boy could be good or the boy could be bad, but and that these could be opportunities, all that stuff, and opportunity cost weighs into it. And there's a whole bunch of factors. But my belief, and from working with other clients, I see this, is that if you schedule every moment of the day, the idea of what gets scheduled gets done kind of can get interrupted because you will get disrupted, you will get distracted, and then you will get diverted.
So I'm curious about the talks that you've done, mostly at the middle school level or at the high school level in
We're
schools.
we're only in the exploratory phases of it yet. So I'm actually the big one I've done is I did a talk with a United Way Action Group, and they were high schoul kids.
Okay,
And they
so
were and they were getting ready to go off to, and when I introduced the Now Your method to them, their faces just they it was a revelation to them in a lot of ways because they didn't really recognize, and I don't think it's that they didn't know it, it's just that they maybe didn't think that they could do it that way, where they said, they weren't thinking about social time, and they weren't thinking about practice time and all that stuff, rehearsal time. They were just trying to go through the mode, like they were just trying to get through the day like adults do. They weren't thinking about these sensory anchors, or the which is a lot of what, and I've been looking into behavioral child behavioral techniques, and sensory anchors are really what these modes and these themes do, especially the themes. Is adults need them, but children are taught this when, if you're trying to get a kid to put away their toys. A lot of I've read behavioral psychologists will say, instead of telling them to clean up the toys that are scattered all over the room, put them in a path leading to the toy box, and then they move then as they do it more frequently, don't make the path as narrow, make it a little bit broader until they recognize that they actually, if they put away the toys as they're finished with them, then they'll be able to, that's the anchor. That toy box is the anchor, right? So for me, when I dealt with these high school kids, they were able to say, okay, I'm in study mode now. Okay, I'm in social mode now. Okay, I'm in work mode, which is if they've got part-time jobs. So they were able to like be fully present in those moments, as opposed to being scattered with, all the technology and all their responsibilities, and frankly all the pressures that they get from their peers. So it was an interesting thing, and I had about half of the kids came up to me afterwards and were like, this is going to change the way I work. I haven't done it for middle schools yet because, frankly, it's just been something that when I've been talking to educators, they've said that's the entry point. High school kids and college kids have a sense of, they know what needs to be done, and maybe they just need to organize their time better. But the way of operating is more entrenched with them as to how things get done. But with kids in middle school, it's not quite there yet, and that's probably the best gateway. So that's what I'm hoping to get to, is to get to that gateway point where I can go in and help them right from that aspect, where the executive functioning skills are still kind of being fostered and developed, as opposed to the later years, which I think it's still helpful. Heck, we're adults and we still need that from time to time. If I get in early and I can teach this stuff early, then I think that the benefits are going to be easier for them to get to faster.
well, and I think kind of what you mentioned, just giving them permission to think about their lives in a different way.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And I think adults need the same thing. We get told, put everything on the calendar, it doesn't get done. But, sometimes just shifting your perspective a little bit helps you look at your work in a different way.
Well, and I think what happens when you theme your days is that the tasks naturally gravitate to those themes after a while. Laura McClellan, the host of The Productive Woman, she struggled with. She's a lawyer, and she her and I had a conversation because I need to talk about themes. I don't think it will work for me, and we started to talk about it. And she said, I love the fact that because you like, for example, I on Wednesdays is when I do my podcast. That's when I do all my podcasting work. That includes show notes, all the audio work that needs to be done, and most of my interviews happen those days. And so I know that on Wednesdays is when I focus on that work. So if someone was to come along and say, "Hey, can you be on this podcast?" I will schedule it for the next Wednesday. That's when I will email them. That's when I shape my task list, my to-do list around those themes, which again gives myself permission to, use those days and those days alone. It also promotes being more proactive than reactive in those situations. But it's tricky because it's a different way of operating. We don't slow down enough. We tend to just move at the speed of light with our tasks and with our to-do lists. And being busy isn't the solution. I mean, the word busy is like a curse word. If you say it too many times, it doesn't have any power. And that's pretty much what's happened. Is I know lots of busy people, but I don't know nearly as many productive ones. So I think having those strategies in place, and they don't have to be difficult. They can be very simple so that you can focus on things like leading, educating, managing, doing those things you ultimately want to do rather than tinkering and fiddling with your system or your to-do list to make sure that everything is kind of filling in those gaps of time so that you are actually moving things forward or at least supposedly moving them forward.
Well, and one of the things that I think some folks in my world have gotten some pretty high leverage from is, and I guess it's kind of like theming, but blocking out 2 or 3 days a week where they are out of their offices and in classrooms.
Yep,
And then
absolutely.
and that's and I'm in the district office, so for me it's just out of the office. So that could mean I'm meeting with other administrators off site, or I'm actually in classrooms. But I found that if you can be disciplined enough to hold to it, makes a huge difference.
And that's the thing is theming doesn't just have to go, during the days of the week. It's easiest because you can tether it to something that we understand, which is the calendar. But you can also tether it to time. So if you're going to be out of the office from 9 to noon, or you want to be out of the office from 9 to noon, you have that capability, then you can theme that time period. So I have one client who is a high-ranking official in a large company, and his concern is always helping his team, like his subordinates and his team members. And then he wants to work on his stuff as well, but he's having problems. He was having problems in kind of segmenting that. And I said, well, and he said his days are too dynamic and he couldn't wrap his head totally around doing daily theming. So I said, well, let's do the weekly. Let's do across the course of the clock rather than the calendar. And I said, so are you a morning person or a night person? And he is more of a night owl, which to me dictates when you're going to be better suited to do what he's going to do. And I said, okay, so in the morning you need to be in serving mode, which means from 9 to noon, if that's when you're going to go in the office. He said, yeah, from 9 to noon, you will deal with everybody else's stuff. So you will be asking your team what they need from you. You may do the walk around the office. You will do all the things that others ask of you. Then you're going to take a break from noon to 1. And he said, you mean lunch? And at my desk, I'm like, no. You will leave your desk and you will take a lunch break. And that's your your equator, basically. You're going to leave. And then when you come back from 1 to 5 or from 2 to 5 or whatever it is, that's your self-serving time. So that's the time where you will work on your agendas, your stuff. And oddly enough, when you self-serve, especially in the role that you have, you will actually be serving your team as well. Maybe not immediately, but down the road. And he started doing this, and he recognized that what was happening is that he structured his schedule. It just gravitated where he would meet with people in the morning rather than the afternoon. And he was initially concerned about being able to close his office door. And I said, do you travel? And he said, yes. And I said, next time you're at a hotel, I said, they have lots of these. Grab one of the do not disturb signs off your hotel door when you leave and take it home with you and put it on your door of your office if that's where you're at, and that's what you will put on your door. So if you have a closed door, a lot of people will knock anyways. But if you have one of those on your door, people are more apt to go, well, hold on, maybe I'll wait. And I said, change it up every few months too, because eventually people get familiar with it and they don't see it anymore. And what's happened is he's been more productive because he's helping others, deals with all their stuff so they don't come to him in the afternoon with stuff. And then he's dealing with his stuff in the afternoon. And if you're a morning person, you'd invert it. So That's one way you can also theme as well. There's lots of ways that you can do this, but the key is that I didn't say from 9 to 10 work on email, from 10 to 11 work on reports. I said make it serving and then self-serving. So it gives them the flexibility to make some choices, because a lot of people need that ability to make choices. They're okay with constraints to a point, but once they feel their freedoms are getting taken away, and I was watching the movie The Big Short yesterday, and the guy who ended up Michael Burry, he's the guy that ended up predicting it well in advance. His investors were freaking out because he was holding their money hostage, and eventually he made them a ton of money, but they still never after he made them all this money, they still held him in ill will and never contacted him again. And it wasn't because he didn't. He made them a ton of money, but the thing is that they didn't like having those constraints imposed upon them. So you have to find that balance there, and whether that's using daily themes from Monday to Sunday and theming every single day. Saturday for me is family day. I don't call it Saturday anymore. Or you go across, you do a horizontal theming. That kind of thing can really, power up your productivity.
Well, and I think one of the things too, you hit on it, because I can picture some school administrators out there, just shaking at the idea of closing their door. I have an open door policy and all this stuff, but if they know that they're going to see you later in the day or later in the week, people are more apt to say, okay, I don't need him right now. I know I'm going to see him in the next couple of days.
Absolutely. And the same thing applies to email. Nothing drives me nuts than seeing 5 emails in a 1 hour span from the same person. So one of the things I will teach these people is, okay, batch, instead of when you capture something, and that's such a critical part of productivity anyways, when you capture something, put in your task app and label it with the person, give them that mode, because people are resources, and I talk about resource-based mode. So give them that, tag it with that person. So instead of emailing them 5 times in an hour, batch them all into one, because every time you email them, you are wasting their time and frankly yours. So it's the same thing. If the policy, the open door policy doesn't have to be 100% it's open up all the time. You could say 100% in the morning, I have an open door policy. After lunch, it's closed door. And that's still 100%. It's just you've changed the constraints.
Absolutely. And I think in a lot of cases, it's more about training and conditioning the folks that you work with to respond in a way that lets you be productive. Now, I want to kind of just finish up a little bit here on the Now Year method. So, if people want to learn more about that specifically, where could they go?
Well, actually, I've got a special URL for everybody here. So if they go there, I've got a basic workflow that I've put together, and they'll be able to have access to it. And they'll also, they'll be able to get updates on the product that I'm working on, which I'm releasing on May 1st, called the Productivity Diet. And basically, it's not about food. It's about, leaning your to-do list, having a fit calendar. If you want to be intentional about losing weight and getting in shape, then you have to have an exercise program and a fitness program in place. The same thing with productivity. So the Now Year method is the methodology that I introduce in that program. It's a course and a book. And of course, the first part will be the science and the story. And then I'm going to have recipes and routines. So you'll actually, if you're a meeting person, you'll have a recipe that will allow you to manage your days a little bit better, because I've got a template that you can use. And you can modify. That's the one thing I love about the Now Year method. It's simple, it's flexible, and it's durable. And I want to put the personal back in productivity. So if you go to productivityist.com/Dowdy, because you and I have the same first name, so we have to go by our last names.
I love it.
They'll be able to. They just have to enter their email, and they'll get that basic workflow sent to them.
That is fantastic. So, all right, and I've preached on this podcast that it's about practical tips and really helping people get a hold of their own personal productivity. So I couldn't have the founder and purveyor of the Productivityist podcast on here without getting into some specifics about habits, routines. If you were what are some of your highest leverage habits that you've found have worked for you or the folks that you've worked with?
There's a couple, and I think that it's oddly enough they are combined and composed of several habits. So one is having a morning and an evening routine. So I'm a big believer in bookending your days because the middle of the day can be anything but predictable. So I want to have something certain and predictable on either side of the equation. So my evening routine is actually more important than my morning routine because I am a night owl. So at the end of my day, I will always go through my task management application and flag my three absolutes for the next day. So some people call them the three big rocks, whatever you want to call them, three most important tasks. I will then write them down on my whiteboard as I come into my office. So they're also flagged digitally, but they're also written down in an analog fashion because I'm still very big on having an analog visibility factor in front of me. And then what I will do is I will journal. And I journal every single day. And what that does is by doing it every day is I limit the amount of time and bandwidth it takes to do a regular review, which is such a critical part of any kind of progress that you want to make. And so by doing that, I can easily course correct. I look at every day as kind of a journey, right? A day in the life. So by the time I'm at the end of my day, I'm very wise. I'm road weary, but I understand the lay of the land. And so that by journaling, what I do is I say, this is what happened, this is what worked, this is what didn't. And I combine my work and life stuff together. So I will say, hey, Saturday night, I did a little bit of writing and came up with some really cool stuff for the productivity diet. And my daughter and I went to the hockey game and watched our junior A hockey team go on a 13-game winning streak. And I can't wait to go with her again. So I will combine all that stuff into the journal. And then that ends my day. I shut my office door and that's it. And that, by the way, the whiteboard is kind of like a note from my ancestor. Because when I wake up the next morning to start my morning routine, I've made my cup of coffee. I've made my NutriBullet shake. I've come downstairs to do my 25 minutes of reading, and I see that whiteboard that tells me my three absolutes. And it might as well be a letter saying, hey, dummy, guy that you, baby New Year that would check Facebook and email first thing in the morning.
I love it.
This is what you need to do. And I'm like, okay, I trust you. You're the old man. I'll follow your lead. And then once I'm done reading, I jump into one of those three tasks. And as long as I get one of those absolutes done before I have to jump into email or do a coaching call. So that's a big one. But the journaling is part of that. And I think that if people spent more time doing, I call it the daily log. But if you journal or have a daily log, it's going to allow you to really get a sense of where you're at and better course correct to make sure that you're going in the direction that you want to go in.
I love it. I'm a huge, huge proponent of the evening and the morning routines. And what I tell people is to write it down
Mm-hmm.
and then look at it over time. And I think I've gone through probably 10 different versions of my evening and morning routines. And it makes a difference if you write it down.
Absolutely. Well, I just wrote a piece for the Globe and Mail about how paper can actually help you be more productive, and it activates the RAS, the reticular activating system in your brain. That when you write something down, it's like, hey, wake up, pay attention. Like this is what you need to be looking at. So, I mean, I've written down stuff as we've been talking. I love my technology. I was a tech writer for a number of years, and I still love my digital tools. But in this case, paper wins. Paper wins out. It doesn't crash. I didn't get any notifications on it while we were sitting there. So I think that having that written, visible, routine, and the nice thing about routines too is that you can add to them. So, my routines have changed subtly over the past few years, but I used to have exercise in there, and then I moved exercise to the afternoon because I wanted to make sure I had enough energy to finish up my day. So it was removed from my morning routine. And so if you have a routine and you've got like 5 or 6 steps in it, you can easily add or subtract things from them. And so I think the only part of my day that's kind of dynamic is the middle part, but even I've kind of future-proofed that by having those daily themes and then the mode-based work to kind of complement that as well. So those are my big things that, again, frameworks foster freedom. That's how I look at it. So the more frameworks I have in place that have some flexibility to them, they're seismic. I live where I live, it's earthquake zone. So I call them seismic, like they've got some give. If it shakes here, it's not going to come crashing down. So for me, I want to make sure I have those in place because you can't trust your brain to always make the right decision because it's going to want to go on Facebook or go on Netflix. You want to be able to say, hey, look, you know what? Tonight's Netflix night. Oh, great. What movie are we going to watch? Not, hey, I just got home and it's 5:30 and I'm tired. What do I do now? I don't know. Well, Netflix is there. So you
Absolutely.
you have to have that in place.
And it wards off decision fatigue.
Absolutely, absolutely, and that's one thing. Just like time, you can't earn it back. Decision fatigue throughout the day, it wears itself down, and you have to. That's why, as a night owl, I make low impact decisions early in the day. So I'll do my lowest energy level or shallow work early in the day, and then in the afternoon or after lunch, that's when I start to spend more time on the deeper work and the stuff that requires more willpower. Because by the time the day is done, you have nothing left. So you have to understand that if you're a morning person, make those high value, high willpower, high decision, juice draining things early in the day. And then later in the day, yeah, that's when you can do things that are a little bit shallower in terms of work. But yeah, it's really important. That's why, again, the president of the United States, two suits. Same brand of underwear with the same color. I was watching him talk to Jerry Seinfeld, and he said, I have the same underwear, same color. That way, I don't have to worry about it. I think he's got more important decisions to make anyway.
I couldn't agree more. I have the same socks, so they
Yep.
all match. I don't have to mess around with that.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Now I can't let you go without talking just real fast about email. I've done multiple shows entirely on email. I know you have. What? Give me your top three things about email.
Well, number one is you should only touch it once. So if an email comes in, you need to make a decision on it. Do I delete it? Do I delegate it? So forward it to somebody else. This is classic getting things done, David Allen.
Yep.
Do I defer it, which means do I move it to my digital task app if it's a digital task, or if it's information, do I move it to say Evernote, let's say, which is what I'll do with any information or reference material, or do I deal with it? Do I just reply and be done with it? Email is not a place to house your stuff because it's called an email inbox. Every time you open up, you have no idea what's in it. And often it's like having bad Christmas. You have and it's other people's
I love
stuff.
it.
So every time you leave things in your email inbox. And if you want to use folders, that's fine. I've got a system called 3Mail where I've got, like the different folders. I've got the inbox, and then I've got the future folder, which has all the stuff that's for the future. And I've got the days of the week, and you can number them if you want. And basically, if I know I want to deal with an email on a particular day, I just drag it to that folder. So instead of having like stacks of folders, again, decision fatigue, I could say, I'm going to deal with this on Monday. I can deal with this on Tuesday. So have something like that in place, something simple. But yeah, touch it once. And I'm a big believer in just archiving. I don't delete emails because you never know when you're going to need them again. And I never, ever, never work out of your inbox. Don't leave stuff in there and say, I'll star it and all that stuff. It doesn't work because every time you go in there, you're on a two-way street all of a sudden. It's not your agenda, it's other people's agendas. So get things out of that inbox and into the tools that you need them to be in. And then, check it less frequently. Email is not an urgency device. It's not meant for that. It was meant to replace the flipping letter. And you would never, ever, ever get mail at your house and go, all right, oh, look, 3 bills, a flyer, a newspaper, and a magazine, and look at them and then just put them back in your mailbox. You would never do that.
Preach on, brother.
Right. But we do that all the time with email. So why? Why? So to me, it's get the stuff out of there, put it in a place that matters. In fact, in Evernote, I don't know if do you use Evernote, Mike?
I don't. And I'll tell you what, that is like my biggest confession. I can't find a task management app that I can
Well,
commit to.
Evernote's not a
Or
task
not,
management app.
yeah.
But people try to make it a task management app, but it's like it's not. It
I
just
use
isn't.
OneNote for my external brain.
And see, so OneNote. So if you're using OneNote, I use Evernote. I renamed the primary notebook in Evernote Inbox because that prompts me. It's a trigger word. I need to get things out of there. It's called My Notebook by default, which tells me nothing. So you, again, create those trigger activities. That's why I have those folders in email that say, okay, well, this is Monday. That means I must look at it because all the stuff here needs to be dealt with on Monday. So just create simple neural pathways for your brain to glom onto because that's all it wants. Your brain was meant to be a factory, not a warehouse. And we tend to use it for that way more often than we should.
Great at generating ideas, terrible at storing them.
Yep.
Mike Vardy, I got to tell you, this has been a fantastic interview, and I won't make you commit to a part two, but I may ask you offline.
You know what? I will commit to a part two.
All right.
Okay.
So if people want to learn more about you and your work and your podcast, where should we send them?
Well, go to that URL I mentioned to you earlier, productivityist.com/Dowdy to get the now year method basic workflow. And if you want to learn more about Productivityist, just go to productivityist.com. Me personally, I have my own website called MikeVardy.com. And if you go to that website, you can click on one thing that says, "What am I doing now?" And you will hear me tell you what I'm doing now. And I'm also at Mike Vardy on the Twitter.
Very cool. Any parting shot, something that I didn't ask you about, or that you really want to get across to aspiring and practicing school leaders?
Uh, don't trust your brain to remember stuff. Get it out of your head and put it down on some place that you can trust, because as long as it's sitting in your brain, it's not going to do much good for you. So get it out and put it somewhere where you can trust. And that's the difference between, being productive and doing productive.
Mike Vardy, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the School Leadership Show, a podcast for aspiring and practicing school leaders. Send your comments, questions, and show ideas to mike@schoolleadershipshow.com. And please consider rating the podcast in iTunes and leaving a comment, and pass the show along to your colleagues.